This is Autoline Daily, the show dedicated to enthusiasts of the global automotive industry. Happy Valentine's Day, everyone. And on this Valentine's Day in 2025, it looks like the tariffs are going to be a story all year long, and maybe even for the next 4 years. Yesterday, President Trump said that tariffs on all imported vehicles, not just those coming from Canada and Mexico, will be coming very soon. The U.S. imports $240 billion worth of vehicles every year. A 25% tariff on them means the CBP, or Customs and Border Protection Agency, would collect $60 billion as goods cross the border and hand that money over to the U.S. Treasury. But it also means that overall car prices would go up by $60 billion. And make no mistake about it, the domestic manufacturers would raise their prices to pretty much match that. And that means that car sales would go down, which would lead to factory layoffs. But Trump may not impose an across-the-board 25% tariff. He's talking about reciprocity, meaning we're going to do to you what you do to us. And it's hard to argue with that logic. So, for example, the U.S. imposes a tariff of 2.5% on cars imported from Europe, while Europe imposes a 10% tariff on cars imported from the U.S. In other words, the European tariff is 4 times higher. The U.S. also has a 25% tariff on pickup trucks, but Europe really doesn't make many pickups. However, here's where things start to get tricky. Europe also imposes a value-added tax, or VAT, on all products sold in Europe, but not if those products are exported. It's really a tax policy designed to boost exports and hurt imports. Japan and South Korea use a value-added tax as well. President Trump says he's going to include those VATs to figure out how high the tariff should be on cars that come from those countries. Germany has a 19% VAT, in South Korea it's 10%, and in Japan it's 20%. Trump says he'll lower his tariffs if other countries cut theirs and remove trade barriers. So, one thing's for sure, this story is far from over. Volkswagen dealers across the U.S. don't like the automaker's plan to sell Scout EVs directly to consumers. The dealers say it's illegal for Scout to sell directly because it isn't truly independent from VW. And it looks like dealers have won a battle in South Carolina. South Carolina law currently prohibits direct sales to customers, but last month lawmakers introduced a bill that would allow car companies that don't have franchise dealers to sell direct. But that bill has stalled out in the state's House of Representatives after a committee suspended debate on it. And while the bill has bipartisan support, the South Carolina Automobile Dealers Association is dead set against it and has lobbied hard to prevent the bill from being enacted. Scout is building its plant in South Carolina and expects to start production in 2028. So depending on how this all goes, it may be illegal for workers at that plant to buy the very vehicles they're making. In a sign that car companies are showing some discipline, inventory levels in the U.S. fell below 3 million units in January. Cox Automotive reports that new vehicle inventory was at 2.92 million units last month, down from 3.11 million in December. But because the sales rate slowed, days supplied increased, which is estimated at 96 days, up from 80 the month before. By having lower inventory, automakers are able to hold pricing where it's at and boost profitability. But the lower inventory levels also suggest that car makers don't expect sales to go up by that much this year. However, Toyota is one exception. It told dealers in the U.S. to expect more inventory this year in an effort to boost sales. Last year, the Toyota brand sold just under 2 million vehicles in the U.S., up 3% from a year earlier, and the company believes it can top that this year while maintaining a low days supply of vehicles.
Making a life full of memories, one road trip at a time. That's what really matters. Bridgestone Weather Peak tires with a 70,000-mile limited warranty.
And now back to Toyota, who's teasing its new third-gen fuel cell system that it will reveal in more detail next Wednesday at the International Hydrogen and Fuel Cell Expo in Japan. It says it was able to improve fuel efficiency, which will result in about 20% more cruising range than before. When applied to a vehicle like the Mirai, it would have about 480 miles of range, or about 80 more miles than before. Toyota also doubled the durability of the system, claiming it's comparable to diesel engines in high power. Cost was another focus. Without providing any figures, it says it significantly lowered costs through design and manufacturing innovations. Size of the fuel cell was reduced as well, which will make it fit into a wide variety of applications. Toyota says it plans to introduce the new system in 2027 at the earliest in markets like Japan, Europe, North America, and China. Chevy officially revealed its version of NASCAR's all-electric prototype. The racing series debuted its EV concept last September. Then Ford recently showed off its version, which is just that NASCAR prototype with a Mustang Mach-E body on top of it. And now it's Chevy's turn, but with a Blazer EV body on top. While we could see a day where all-electric NASCAR races are a thing, we think it's more likely that NASCAR would turn to crossover/SUV body styles first, since Ford and Chevy no longer offer passenger sedans. Toyota, NASCAR's other participating automaker, clearly still has sedans, but when it shows off its EV prototype for the racing series, which crossover or SUV do you think it will use? Scrap copper has decent value right now, which makes the thick cables at charging stations a target. So Tesla is trying out a couple of anti-theft solutions. One is like the exploding die packs used by banks. The outside of the cable gets covered with a wrap that's embedded with a series of hoses that, when cut, shoots out a high-pressure die all over the place. The other solution is to etch, quote, property of Tesla motors directly into the copper wire. So a recycler would see that and know that it's been stolen. Speaking of Tesla, could we start to see state officials driving around armored versions of its vehicles? The U.S. State Department has set aside a budget of $400 million for, quote, electric armored vehicles over the next 5 years. When the budget was first drafted under the Biden administration in December of last year, it included, quote, armored Tesla production units as one of its line items. Also included were armored sedan, armored EV, not sedan, and even armored BMWs. But the State Department has now changed all of those to the more generic armored electric vehicles. However, we're unsure if it also changed how those expenses will be recorded, because the vehicles were strangely listed under categories like miscellaneous food manufacturing. The financial news coming out of the supplier industry hasn't been good lately, but Magna's Q4 earnings report offered a glimmer of hope. Sales hit $10.4 billion, up 2%, thanks to higher production in the US and China, which offset lower production in Europe. Magna's operating profit was up 23% to $381 million, but its net profit dropped 25%, coming in at $203 million. Interestingly, one of the reasons its profit slipped was because of the cost of shutting down production of the Fisker Ocean at its Steyr plant in Austria. Automakers and suppliers in Europe have slashed thousands of jobs, especially in Germany, in order to cut costs. And now Porsche is the latest, but it isn't making cuts as deep as the others. The automaker announced it's cutting 15% of its workforce at its main plant in Stuttgart and one of its R&D centers in Germany. That translates to about 1,900 jobs. Porsche plans to reach that goal by 2029 with early buyouts and severance packages, not through forced layoffs. The automaker is looking to cut costs because of slumping sales in China and weak EV demand. But that brings us to the end of today's show. Thanks for tuning in, and I hope that you have a great weekend.
Autoline Daily is brought to you by Bridgestone, solutions for your journey. Intrepid Control Systems, over-the-air engineering boost your game. And by Teages Automotive Technologies, the formula for better mobility.
There's nothing wrong with heavy metal. and up.
But with world-class composite material, Teijin Automotive Technologies makes vehicles lighter, safer, and more eco-friendly.
Developing today's vehicles, issues can happen in an instant. What good is knowing your problems without the data to solve them? Meet Wireless Neovi Cloud, your secure off-the-shelf solution, empowering real-time collaboration for quick resolution. With Wireless Neovi Cloud, your team can prevent issues before they can escalate. Driver communication data and remote diagnostics to analyze and resolve your problems using OTA, allowing your executives oversight throughout the process. Wireless Neovi Cloud, your vehicle update solution in production and on the road. Intrepid Control Systems, driven by your data.
Wards is the industry leader for news, data, and analysis. That's why companies across the globe subscribe to our premium service, maybe even your own. Log in for subscriber access now. Check your company's intranet for details and rely on wardsauto.com to keep you informed.